Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Name on the Trophy, the Manchester United podcast. It's been a tricky weekend for United with that defeat to Arsenal on the back of the 1-1 draw against Crystal Palace. Title talk, potentially too premature, maybe a top four race instead. I'm here to discuss this. The Arsenal game on this latest episode with Steven Railston, our special guest from the Manchester Evening News, making his debut. He's been itching to get out on the pitch and appear on Name on the Trophy. So it's good to have you on, Stephen.
I said to your football last week, I said, "Where's my invite, Dom? You've been doing the
A few days
podcast for
later,
now?
a few days later. Yeah, I think it's just about a month now. But we played five-a-side and itching to get on. So I duly obliged, and here he is for you.
Delighted to be here. Delighted.
Stephen and I are going to discuss the Arsenal game. Obviously, dissect where it went wrong, how much we think it did go wrong for United, and assess the picture as it now stands with City and Arsenal out on top and United back into fourth. Stephen, 3-2, obviously, late goal, Eddie Nketiah breaking United hearts, but did they get what they deserved in the end? It was a fantastic game, but not one that United dominated for much of it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I saw you tweet actually about expected goals XG after the game, and I mentioned that on my post-match analysis because the naked eye tells you that United really didn't create much and they struggled going forward and attacking. But the XG, I think it was 0.34, something like that, which just shows how poor United were in the final third. Didn't really do much going forward apart from, that goal from Rashford was stunning, to be fair. It's for a player that's who's so high in confidence at the moment, and his improvement in form has been remarkable. But obviously, they did get it to 2-2, which shows spirit and character after Arsenal made it 2-1. And I thought that finish from Martinez was fantastic. The little loop of the header over the top of Ramsdale after that error. But after that goal, I said on today's podcast on the Manchester Evening News, there was a feeling of inevitability for me. Arsenal were just laying it on, weren't they? They were relentless with their attacks. They were pushing forward, and United were pinned back. And I guess it was the same against Palace on Wednesday night, when the last 10 minutes, it was the same pattern of the game, same kind of game was developing again in London again, history repeating itself. And it always felt like the opposition were going to score. And they did in the 90th minute, which was another big blow to take, to concede in, the final minutes of the game. It's never easy. But I think wider picture, like obviously you saw a lot of conversation on social media about it. United fans aren't too disgruntled, aren't too upset at the result. I think a lot has been said about Arteta's rebuild, and he's kind of an example, isn't he? When you look at how long he's been at the Emirates for, I think around 3 years now, and he's done a terrific job. Genuine, obviously title challengers, not challengers, candidates, and I think they will win the league. Actually, there is something special building at the Emirates, but it just shows you if you give Ten Hag time, I think he could build something like that too, because he's had a really impressive first 6 months.
Yeah, it was probably an indication of, like you say, the stage that United are at under Ten Hag and the development of the side. And obviously, I think there's three main gaps in the side that played against Arsenal. Not in the squad, maybe. Obviously, the loss of Casemiro was very important. I think McTominay didn't do the same job in between the lines to protecting the back four. I think maybe if Casemiro was playing, United would be able to force Arsenal back a little bit and get out of their own half and protect the back four. And that wasn't able to happen, especially in the second half when, like you say, it was just wave after wave of pressure, and Arsenal just looked like inevitably they were going to score. And then David De Gea would probably be another one that I would say, with his performance, especially with the ball at his feet, starting the moves from United from the back. I think Gary Neville mentioned it on commentary for Sky Sports that Lisandro Martinez was playing it back to him when he probably shouldn't have been. He should have probably been playing it forward, even long, up to the likes of Weghorst and Rashford. And then Weghorst himself is probably, we all know he's a bit of a stopgap signing, and I think he actually did quite well on the day. I thought he did really well, actually, with his pressing and holding the ball up, trying to get United up the pitch. But yeah, until those issues are addressed, and obviously Casemiro is a one-off thing, but it was such a telling absence, I thought, particularly Casemiro, wasn't it? It was just critical that United had him, and as soon as he got that booking against Palace, I think a lot of United fans knew the writing was on the wall.
That was huge. His absence was always going to be huge. And I don't know what you thought of the midfield selection. I probably thought it was right thing to go with McTominay. He could have put Fernandes on the right like he did in the derby, and I thought that's what he would have done, to be fair. I thought he would have went with Fernandes on the right, Fred, McTominay and Eriksen. We'll get on to Eriksen in a bit. Actually, I think that's worth discussing. But I think the game just highlighted where the two sides are, to be honest. I mean, you've got United, as I've just said, who are in this transitional campaign. I know it's a cliche word, transitional, but it is a transitional season. And, top four this season would have been a success. That's the truth of it after a train wreck of last season. And Ten Hag got them on course for that. And I think yesterday it showed the areas and the players that United need to replace, really. They're still quite far behind even a club like Arsenal, who have progressed and made those signings in the last few seasons. You've just mentioned De Gea and Wan-Bissaka, although he's been fantastic in the last few weeks. And to be honest, I'm surprised, as I didn't think he had that in him. I think we've all praised him, haven't we? And rightly so, because he has been really good. But he was exposed yesterday. He was caught sleeping for the first goal at the back post. And I think for the third goal as well, he could have done better. I think he was playing him just onside. If he maybe racks a bit quicker and steps out, maybe that's not a goal. But I'd agree with you as well that they were perhaps overplaying at times at the back. I think it was highlighted on Match of the Day. Martinez maybe could have just hit the channel. And he tried to play it back. And obviously that led to Nketiah's goal. So all in all, I just think it does highlight the areas for improvement. Long term, you need a new goalkeeper. You need new. Wan-Bissaka is not a long-term answer. We know that, but Dalot needs another, competitor in that position. So it just kind of highlights those areas for improvement, and it'll come. It's going to come. I think supporters have got patience, and it will come.
With Ten Hag's management and the things that he's put in place, and you can see the ball is rolling. And a lot of pundits said afterwards, gave the United a lot of praise. They contributed to a really entertaining and extremely high quality game.
It was a fantastic game. It really was. Yeah,
one of the best games of the season, undoubtedly. It's just a shame from United's fans' point of view that they surrendered that chance to get something out of it. On the midfield point that you made, I agree that I thought Fred should have started, especially to account for the absence of Casemiro. Asking McTominay's not the same player as Casemiro.
No.
I still don't really buy into this argument that he is the replacement for Casemiro. I think that both he and Fred are better in slightly more advanced positions as number 8.
Yeah.
And then I think Fred is your better number 8 if you're going to play one or the two of them. So put them both together if you haven't got Casemiro, and let Eriksen float about, because he's not a defensive player. We can get onto our Eriksen chat now if you like, because I've got a little bit of an issue with him in these big games, and I've made the point before that I just don't think that you should be starting him and Fernandes both in central positions in a game like this. You're just asking for trouble. Jordan Jarrett Bryan came on this show a week ago and said if United don't pack that midfield and don't get energy and legs around Partey and Xhaka and Odegaard, then they'll get beat, and they did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he had a first fantastic 3 or 4 months at the club, and he's been a fantastic signing. Don't get it wrong, he has been incredible considering he was signed on a free transfer. But that's what I mean when it just kind of highlights the areas for improvement. Eriksen is not the long-term answer. He's an aging 30-odd midfielder, and he has done a job this season. But as you've just highlighted, in these big games when you need to sustain an intensity and a tempo, he's just not that man, is he? And you look past 60, 70 minutes, and he starts to struggle. He's not closing down players. I mean, we saw that with Saka for the goal. He should have got tighter. Saka cuts in. To be fair, it was an excellent finish. It was unbelievable. It was straight as an arrow, wasn't it, into the bottom corner. But Eriksen should have done better, and I think supporters are starting to pick up on that now. I think the last few weeks there's been a few moments in games where the last half an hour, I think Eriksen's starting to flag a bit, and I think with the style that Ten Hag wants to play long term, I don't think he's going to align with that. And you've just said you had someone obviously on the podcast last week that predicted it would be a disaster if he's in that midfield against Partey, and he kind of bullied them, didn't he, in that regard in the last half an hour. The physicality really told, I think, and exposed Eriksen in that regard.
United are in need of that complete number 8, aren't they? And it's like gold dust to play like that in world football. There aren't that many to go around.
There's someone called Jude Bellingham at Dortmund who's all right.
Well, though he may well be an option. Even someone like Jude Bellingham, though.
You can play him as a 10 or a 6. You can play him anywhere in the midfield.
You don't know quite where to put him. And United have Casemiro, who is very much a number 6, very much a deep lying defensive midfielder. They like Frenkie de Jong. We know that. They tried to sign him last summer. He is that passing metronome player who I think would actually work perfectly with Casemiro if you were to put them together. because De Jong covers a lot of ground as well. He's not like he doesn't do a lot of running. And then Fernandes ahead of them. I kind of see that maybe as the balance rather than a Bellingham who is a runner. And then maybe certainly in a game like Arsenal, Bellingham would be very useful because he would break up the play and cover a heck of a lot of ground.
Yeah.
But De Jong is that sort of pace tempo setter that United don't have in a deep position. Eriksen wants to do it in further up, doesn't he?
Saga, though. I'm sorry, I can't take another saga of De Jong.
No, none of us can. None of us can.
Don't put us through that, please.
I was going to. That's definitely another podcast. We have talked about De Jong, and yeah, we can wait and see what happens in the summer on that one. Just on you mentioned Wan-Bissaka, and I sort of loathe to criticize him because of how he's played recently, and I think he sometimes does get a bit of an unfair rap when people talk about going forward and on the ball. I think he's quite good on the ball sometimes, and against City there was that little compilation of him, wasn't there, going past a couple of players and a little bit of skill. I don't think he's a bad option. If he is your second choice right back, I have no problem with that personally.
I think before Ten Hag's appointment, there was definitely a huge case for him to leave. I think he declined a lot. He didn't improve under Solskjaer. I don't think he got tactical input from him during his reign, and I think he just saw a player that kind of declined, and he got to a point under Ranić when he got replaced, and you just thought, I think his days at club are numbered. I think he had to leave, and don't get this wrong, I thought he would be a fantastic right back for, let's say, a top bottom half Premier League club, so a Wolves, for example, or maybe someone like a West Ham or someone like that. Do you know what I mean? I think he would do a job for them. But for a club like United, I've always thought, and I was a big Wan-Bissaka fan, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I think going forward, obviously it's the big talking point. He does lack quality in the final third for me. However, saying that, as you've just suggested, he has improved under Ten Hag. That's a fact, and it's a credit to Ten Hag that he can get the best out of the players that he's got. But it's also a credit to Wan-Bissaka because he has made the improvements himself and his performances have been better. But long term for me, I still think he needs to go, to be honest, Dom. Dalot surprised us. I mean, I was always a bit of a Dalot skeptic. I wasn't sure he was good enough to be a first team starter. But you look at his improvement and he's been fantastic. So I think he's good enough, obviously, for the rest of the season. There was talk of Wan-Bissaka leaving this month. With other clubs perhaps interested in maybe a loan or a permanent deal, but he's definitely good enough to deputise for Dalot, isn't he, for the rest of the season? We've seen that last few weeks, but it was a game to forget yesterday, I think, for Wan-Bissaka.
Yeah, it was a game where key individual errors like that
you're
were
right.
going to be magnified, and a team like Arsenal, you have to give them credit for exploiting them, and it would have taken a perfect defensive performance from United to get something from the game. And I did think even the likes of Martinez and Varane, I think they did very little wrong in the game. Shaw was exposed a little bit by Saka, wasn't he? But Saka was playing, I just think he's playing football on a different level at the moment to most other wingers in the league, bar maybe Rashford.
I thought that last night. I thought that watching it, I was thinking he's sure having a good game, and I was kind of keeping a close eye on him. And when Saka was cutting in, he was giving them a headache, Saka. But I thought to myself, what left back in the league would deal with Saka in this kind of form? It's the same with Rashford. What opposition fullback are going to deal with Rashford in that form? There's not many defenders in the Premier League that are going to deal with Rashford in that form or Saka in that form. So I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And you say give credit to Arsenal. I mean, throughout my whole lifetime, they've been a quote unquote banter club. Do you know what I mean? They've been the joke, and the end of the Wenger years were incredibly toxic. And then you've had these kind of false dawns since. Emery was poor, but you just Arteta, you have to give them credit. They've got something building. You can feel it. The atmosphere. When you go to the Emirates, you would never expect an atmosphere like that, would you? And that contributed to the intensity of the game last night. The players reacted it from the first whistle, didn't they? It was a fantastic spectacle to watch.
Yeah, and United, I think to Ten Hag's credit, they were never going to just sit back. They were forced back, I think, rather than they sat back.
Yeah.
And I don't think the criticism of Ten Hag, I saw some criticism for him bringing on Fred, for example, and taking off Anthony. But I think at that stage, Ten Hag was being pragmatic. He was looking at the flow of the game, and he was seeing how strong Arsenal are. He was paying respect to how good Arsenal are under Arteta. So yeah, I don't think on that front, Arteta's doing a fantastic job, and United can only use him as an example. One area where United lacked, and I wanted to come on to a bit more of an in-depth chat about, was was Weghorst
Right.
and the striking position. I was actually speaking to my dad on the phone before this podcast, and he said Weghorst did a job that was 10 times better than what Anthony Martial would have done. Start with that claim, and I can see the logic in it. I do think Weghorst put himself about a heck of a lot, and his pressing has surprised me since he's come in. But United are still some way off in that position in terms of quality, aren't they?
Yeah, I think if Martial's fit, I'd start him personally over Weghorst. You analyse his last two games against Palace and against obviously Arsenal yesterday. I actually think he was better against Arsenal personally. I think that the game actually suited him a bit more. You're right, his link-up play was fantastic and he did do a job. My problem with it is he just never looks, well, he's only had 2 games, but he's not looked like a goal threat yet, has he? I guess.
Not at all.
But I think if you have Martial on the pitch, at least if you're in those moments or he gets a half chance, you've got a chance of finishing it and getting a goal. It was a controversial signing for me. It wasn't for supporters because there's such trust behind Ten Hag at the moment, and there's a lot of faith in him. And I completely get that. Ten Hag has earned that trust over the last 6 months. But if that signing happened a year ago, could you imagine the outcry? Could you imagine the rage? I think you
said this.
I
tweeted.
agree.
It's not a good signing. It's
No.
not a Manchester United signing. It's a complete stopgap. And no one should pretend anything otherwise, And to be fair to a lot of United fans on Twitter, they admit that, but they trust Ten Hag and they trust his process. And I do see some of the logic in it when I see Weghorst's pressing, and his commitment is really admirable. I think he's come in, he's just looked 100% committed, which for a player on loan, you don't always get. But I think whether Weghorst or Martial start over the next few months will depend on the game. I think that Martial's a bit more of a luxury, and against the lower to middling sides, I agree, definitely start him, and he's got that moment of magic in him, and he's got that link up with Rashford. I think Weghorst is his name always sounds like workhorse, but he is a workhorse. It's always like nominated.
Well, he reminds us of myself, Dom. You're right. I know this might sound stupid, but I remember in sixth form, and I'd play up front. I'd play, as a striker, but I could never finish. I was terrible. But I'd graft and I'd press from the front, and I'd always try to justify why I'd be playing that position. Well, I can press, I can run, I work hard, and that's what it's almost like with Weghorst at the moment, isn't it? He's probably not going to be a goal for the rest of the season. He is doing a job, and with Martial out, I guess they need him. I think you do need that kind of player at centre forward, as opposed to maybe playing a false 9 or Fernandes in that position. So I think it is, it was important he was signed, and he will have a role to play. I was talking about it the other day, and I said, what would be a good season for Weghorst? 5 goals, maybe. Would you agree with that? Well, especially now.
Well, I said I didn't think he'd get double-figure goals before he signed, and I'm even more confident in that opinion now. I think 5 goals. I think a Henrik Larsson sort of is the platform for him, like make an impact, score a couple of key goals, and show that commitment. And he's doing that so far. So it's complete fair play to him. My question is, are United playing to his strengths? And my answer to that so far is completely no. That they're not a side really that put in a lot of crosses.
No, but
that's what he's going to thrive on.
That comes from the wings as well. I think someone who I've been quite critical of actually in the last few weeks, and I think fans are starting to realise now, are starting to click on to his performances, is Anthony, Dom. £84 million. Obviously, he is 22 and he's coming from the Dutch league. So there is going to be a period of adaptation, and he does need to be given the benefit of the doubt. But with this season, with Ronaldo leaving and with the attacking options so limited, he needed to hit the ground sooner rather than later, really. And he's probably not got the luxury of that time like other players before might have. So his performances have perhaps come under a bit more scrutiny, or they will start. When you look at his contribution, he scored 5 goals, 3 of them in the Premier League, 2 in the cup competitions. The first 3 goals were in his first 3 games at the club. I think it was Arsenal on his debut, Man City at the Etihad, and Everton at Goodison Park. And he's not scored since in the Premier League. But it goes beyond that for me. My problem with Anthony is not the goals and assists, because you can forgive him for that. He's not impacting games over 90 minutes. He's having flashes of brilliance, flashes of what he can do. Oh, that was good. Yeah, he has got a bit of quality. He has got talent. You can see why Ten Hag signed him, but he's not sustaining that. And this cutting in thing as well. I mean, every player's got their own style, every player's got their preference, but it's becoming tedious for me. It's every time it's too predictable. If we're watching it on TV and we know what he's going to do, a Premier League fullback is going to know his weaknesses, isn't it? They're going to know, just show him down the channel. But he doesn't want to go down the channel, and that's frustrating as well, isn't it? It doesn't seem like he can beat a man, and I think he's actually short of a yard of pace. He's quick off the mark, but I don't think he can actually sustain that pace. I've argued
he's got a bag of tricks.
He certainly does. Yeah, he's
defend him slightly. He's got huge talent. He's got amazing skill, and actually, for the first half hour against Arsenal, I thought he was electric. I thought he was really good.
Yesterday. Yeah,
he fades in games. He fades quickly in games at times, and I think that's the point you're making, is that he struggles to translate a performance across a full 90 minutes. And like Rashford against Arsenal, he just needed the ball and he would make something happen. It feels like Anthony once every 4 or 5 times he gets the ball, he'll do something. The rest of the time, he looks like he lacks a bit of confidence, and he'll cut in and just pass back to the full back. And that's frustrating. And United fans at games, I've been at Old Trafford recently, where they have been really frustrated with Anthony. And there's been groans and there's been shouts to go down the channel. People are desperate for him to go on the other side, just to give the defender something to think about. Maybe that is a confidence thing. Maybe that's just something that he needs to work on. He needs to have the confidence to do. He obviously can do it. He's not become an 80-odd million pound footballer who can only go one way. Maybe he just doesn't quite feel that he's got that in his game at the moment to do it week in, week out.
Well, there's been a suggestion that
I want patience with Anthony. I keep saying,
of course,
I still want patience with him.
I'm not out there to get him. Don't get us wrong. I just think it's a reasonable thing to suggest over the last 4 weeks or after the World Cup and before the World Cup, to be fair as well, because he does seem a bit one-dimensional. But that's not. It's his first season in Manchester. Do you know what I mean? It's his first season at the club. You have to give him time. But as I've just mentioned, it's the scenario that it is, with the attacking options being so limited. United really needed him to hit the ground running this season, and I don't think that's been the case.
Yeah, you've got to think about Jadon Sancho coming back.
Yeah.
From the problems that he's had. Ten Hag's obviously got a huge amount of faith in him. He's hit levels in his career that Anthony hasn't hit, to be fair, scoring and assisting in the Bundesliga to the extent that he did, and even the odd moment for United already. Do you see that as a straight decision that Ten Hag is going to have when Sancho comes back? Because you can't move Rashford from the left right now, and the signing of Weghorst suggests that it's either Weghorst or Martial through the middle. So therefore it's Anthony or Sancho on the right. Yeah,
it's going to have to be. Wouldn't it be brilliant if Sancho returned and he looked back to those Dortmund levels? Because we've just not seen it during his time at United, unfortunately. I was a huge fan of Sancho during his time at Dortmund. In danger of sounding like a footballing hipster, but I did watch him quite a bit in the Bundesliga. But I always said I think the Bundesliga suited him a bit more. I think the speed of the game, the tempo of the game, he was offered more space in the wide areas, more time on the ball, and that's probably why he was so successful in that division. But I still believe he's got the talent and the qualities to succeed in the Premier League. And I think he's under the right manager to do it. So when he returns, I think you're right. I think it will be a case of Sancho playing on the right, because you can't take Rashford away from that position. You just can't. I was watching him yesterday. I mean, I've watched him obviously every week, every game. And I just think, is this the same player as last season? I remember. Do you remember the Norwich game last season, Dom? At Carrow Road. I think it was in December. I think Ronaldo scored a penalty.
I've wiped it from my memory, Stephen. To be honest,
PTSD.
The whole of last season is just gone. I do vaguely remember.
Yeah, that for me, and the Chelsea game a few months later at Old Trafford was 2 worst performances in his whole career. He looked disinterested. He was slow. He was lethargic and confident. And now, just completely different player, isn't he? So you can't move him from the left. So across on the other side, for me, it's between obviously Anthony and Sancho. I'd throw Garnacho in the mix actually. Obviously his preferences, his preferences for the left, and I know that. But he's played a few games in the academy on the right before. He's only 18, so if you get him in there now, I think it's worth an experiment personally. Obviously, fans would argue as well. I've had a few tweets suggesting Palestri come in, which is fair enough. But I'd rather have Garnacho. I try him on the right.
That's a good shout. Yeah, my wild card is to recall Amad Diallo from Sunderland. I think he's recently been given the Championship Player of the Month for his performances there. Scored a number of key goals. Like Palestri, he arrived with that tag of a wonder kid, that United spent a whole heap of money actually to bring him from Atalanta a couple of years ago, but haven't really seen him in a first team picture since. So I don't think that will happen. I think that they're happy to keep him at Sunderland until the end of the season to continue his development rather than be United's third, fourth choice on the right. But maybe worth thinking about in 6 months' time when Ten Hag's assessing his right wing options, providing Anthony struggles do continue, which I still think is a big if.
Yeah, I mean, he's set the state at Sunderland now, isn't he? I think it's been confirmed kind of behind the scenes. But anything that weakens Sunderland, Dom. If he was
sorry to mention Sunderland with Newcastle fans.
But anything to weaken Sunderland, that would be fantastic. Get him recalled.
We shall see. What about the rest of the season now for United? It was a week ago that title talk was on everybody's lips, and the win over City in the derby was fantastic and a real high for the club. It felt like a real high from 3 or 4 years. United hadn't felt that good. The momentum, maybe since those early Solskjaer days, had not been so high. A week later, the reality check has very much been given. Where are United now, in your opinion, and what constitutes a good season with just over half a league campaign played?
Luke Shaw used the term reality check after the defeat yesterday. He used that, and I think that's fair enough. I think the talk of a title charge was a bit premature for me personally, but it had to happen because of where they were in the table. It was always bound to happen after the Manchester derby, and fair enough, because they were in that position in mid-January. So, it was always going to happen among supporters. However, regarding the rest of the season, for me, it's fantastic. They're defying expectations. As I've said earlier in the podcast, it was supposed to be a transitional. It's a cliche, but it was supposed to be a kind of season when, Ten Hag got a bit of a clear out. He built towards, installed the foundations for success and for a brighter future, built towards next season. But he's doing fantastic, and he has defied expectations. I think 6 points clear of fourth in Tottenham. So preventing a disaster, top 4 finish in my head is guaranteed anyways. I think they'll finish third. I don't think Newcastle will sustain the results. And obviously Chelsea and Liverpool are coming. But I think United are nailed on for third. League Cup, obviously, as well. Nottingham Forest, we're recording on the Monday's podcast, but they've got them on Wednesday. Barring another disaster, you think, they're in the final at Wembley. So if you said to any United fan at the start of the season that they'd be in the final of the League Cup and top 4 would be nailed on, snap your hands off. Definitely. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So
absolutely.
He's been fantastic, Ten Hag. I had doubts about him personally. I looked at his CV. Saw what he did at Ajax, and I thought that Ajax team that reached the semi-final of that Champions League, I thought they were a bit overhyped. Do you remember Villarreal reached the semi-final of the Champions League against Liverpool? Well, people remember them, probably not, but people really talk about that Ajax team and hold them in high regard. But Ten Hag has been fantastic. He's been the best thing that's happened to the club in over a decade, and it's great to see.
Yeah, I like your Ajax point, actually. I think they were helped by 1 or 2 very talented young individuals, Frenkie de Jong being one of them, and Matthias de Ligt, and maybe Ten Hag really proved himself at Ajax when he regenerated that side after they left and won the league and did really well in the Champions League with a lot of players who had been flops in the Premier League, mid-table flops, Sebastian Haller and Dusan Tadic and the like. I think that was a really impressive achievement by Ten Hag.
I mean, Tadic looked like Messi, didn't he?
Well, yeah, and he's making Marcus Rashford look like Cristiano Ronaldo in his pomp. So
I knew that was coming.
No, all credit to him, and I agree. I think third place and the Carabao Cup, United fans would be absolutely
fantastic season.
And then maybe you can think about pushing the top 2 in finishing as close to them as possible. Thinking about points tallies. 75, 80 points, thinking about getting past Barcelona in that Europa League playoff, and then who knows after that. It's all in Ten Hag and United's hands at the moment, isn't it? It feels like he's really in control of this destiny. There's been a blip or 2 in the last week, but he has the backing of the fans and he has the buy-in of the players as well.
There's a unity and an atmosphere that I've not experienced since moving down to Manchester 5 years ago around the club. There's this real feeling of optimism, and it's greater. It's better to report on. You remember how last season was so miserable. I can't remember. It was 16 wins they got in the entirety of last season. So I was reading that recently. Someone like that's probably a false start there. We'll have to double check that. But the improvement has been remarkable, and Ten Hag deserves all the credit for that. all the credit for
Yeah.
that. Looking forward to the summer though, Dom. Obviously, I think the main issue for me is a striker. They need a goal scorer, don't they? Who would you have? What centre forward do you bring to the club? Because for me, obviously, Osimhen from Napoli's been touted, but I think Harry Kane would be the perfect signing for Man United.
Yeah, well, we've chatted about this on the podcast before, and Osimhen's name keeps coming up, and you can't deny. Look at what he's doing for Napoli. You look at his just all-round ability. He looks like the complete striker, and obviously he's got that age profile that will be appealing to a lot of clubs. I would take Harry Kane. I think maybe it goes against what a lot of people think United should be doing recruitment-wise in terms of age profile, but Casemiro has proven that for 2 or 3 years, a player even approaching 30 or in their 30s, you can't go wrong if they're proven at top level. And you can just imagine Harry Kane is like a real deluxe Weghorst in a way, isn't he? Like, a Weghorst who will score goals. Maybe I will clip that up. Yeah. He drops deep, he'll hold the ball up, and you can imagine his link-up play with the likes of Rashford and Fernandes. I mean, it's a mouth-watering thought, I think, for United fans. There's a lot who rail against Harry Kane. He's not that popular on social media for some reason. I don't know what that reason is, because he's scored so many goals and he's done it for England in big tournaments. So he would get a huge tick from me.
Oh, hugely. He's fantastic. And I think he turns 30 in July, I think it is. So, but
as do I, Stephen. As do I. Almost exactly the same age as me.
2 prolific goal scorers, Tom. The similarities don't
best.
No, my point is 30 is the new 27, really, isn't it? Players are lasting longer. The careers, the longevity is increasing. And you see with Casemiro, he looks, dare I say, almost in his prime. I thought, look, Real Madrid don't get rid of elite players, but Casemiro's been excellent. He's been outstanding, world class. Same with Varane this season, to be fair to him. Last season wasn't, plain sailing. There was a few injuries, and he did look good when he played, but this season he's really proved it, hasn't he? So I'd have no fears with Harry Kane's age, really. I think he just brings goals, and that's exactly what this side need.
3 or 4 years at the top for Kane at United, that would be dream stuff. Just quickly on Forest and the Carabao Cup, you've mentioned it before, that it's just a great chance for United to reach a final. It's not going to be the easiest of tasks, I don't think, especially away in the first leg. I think that there'll be a few issues, and just with the churn of games and the amount of fixtures United have coming up, Ten Hag's going to really have to prove his worth and manage his squad well.
Yeah, Nottingham Forest obviously beat Liverpool at home, didn't they, at the City ground, and they've made some really, really good improvements the last month or so. I think they've been helped by the World Cup break, actually gave them time to kind of recoup and get a plan sorted, and give those how many players, 100 players at the same time to settle in. So you're right, it won't be an easy first leg, but I do expect United to get through quite comfortably in the end. I think class will tell. But it's an important point you make about the fixtures. United have obviously got Reading on Saturday afternoon in the FA Cup, and Nottingham Forest already out of the FA Cup. So they've got an extra few days to rest and kind of prepare for that. So that might give them an edge. But I still expect United to make it to the final. Obviously, the other semi-final is between Newcastle and Southampton. I'd expect Newcastle to come through that. So the prospect of a Manchester United in Newcastle final at Wembley would be some game, and I think it would be some atmosphere.
Yeah, I'd be looking forward to that if it does happen. And just United not looking forward to playing weekend midweek from now pretty much until the end of the season. That's going to be it's going to be exhausting for all of us even watching. But
keeps us busy.
Yeah, it does keep us busy, exactly. Yeah, that's pretty much all we've got time for. But Steven, it's been a pleasure to see you make your name on the trophy debut. Thank you very much.
I've absolutely loved it, Dom. It's been a fantastic half an hour or 45 minutes. It's flown by.
And you've snuck in just enough Newcastle United references to keep you happy.
Well, Dom, if I say what's the only team to go to the Emirates this season to get a point, do you know?
Well, I think it might be Newcastle, but the only team to beat Arsenal in the league is Manchester United. So, rough with the smooth. But you can follow Steven on Twitter. Is it at Steven Railston?
Yeah, just my name, yeah.
And follow his work on the Manchester Evening News as well. When it comes to name on the trophy, we're on Twitter at on the trophy. We're now on Instagram as well, name_on the trophy. I'm still thinking about a TikTok. Whether I can appeal to the kids or not,
I could see you dancing on TikTok. I could see that.
Well, if that's what it takes to get the listeners in, we will see. Steven, thank you very much. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back for another episode of Name on the Trophy very soon. Cheers.